Let's break this all down with MS Now senior national security reporter David Rohde, New York Times investigative reporter Mark Mazzetti, former presidential Middle East advisor Ambassador Mark Ginsburg, and retired Marine Colonel Mark Cancian, senior advisor at CSIS. David, walk us through this new standoff in the Strait and what led to its, what was agreed upon reopening deteriorating just so quickly.
So the progress is a ceasefire in Lebanon that starts on Friday. That's something that Iran has wanted, and that seemed to be moving well. The foreign minister of Iran said, citing that ceasefire in Lebanon, will reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The problem was the Trump administration, the president announced that the U.S. was going to start this blockade of Iranian ports and maintain that, despite the ceasefire in Lebanon. And then this all comes to a head Saturday. The Iranians fire on the two tankers that they're Indian tankers trying to move out of the Strait of Hormuz. And then the images you just showed. What happens is that U.S. destroyer is tracking that Iranian vessel, the Tuska, for 6 hours. It's actually heading towards Iran. For the U.S., it's a blockade. Nothing can go into an Iranian port or out of an Iranian port. They warn them repeatedly for 6 hours to stop, and they don't. And they make the decision to, they tell them to evacuate the engine room, fire, as you saw, with that long-range weapon, and then take control of the tanker. It's the first time that U.S. Marines have taken control of an Iranian ship. And so we're supposed to have peace talks today
and that's what's hanging in the balance. In the meantime, what do we know about what happens with this ship and the crew?
So they're in American custody now. And it's not clear, when they'll be released or how they'll be released. But and that's another tension point, and that Iran is going to want them to be released, maybe as part of these talks. I hope both sides go. More talks are better than any. Steve Witkoff is in Islamabad and ready. Vice President Vance is, we're not sure when, but will be leaving soon. But at this point, right now, Iran has not yet agreed it's going to attend the talks in Islamabad.
Colonel Cancian, let me get your thoughts on this naval operation and whether you expect Iran to retaliate.
Well, the blockade has been quite successful from a military perspective. We'll see whether the administration can turn that into political advantage. Iran says it's going to retaliate, and it always has. So it will retaliate in some way. It might use cyber. They've been doing a lot of that recently, and that would be a relatively easy way for them to retaliate. They could do something in the Gulf, but that would break the ceasefire. They might be reluctant to do that. They could take a shot, for example, at the two U.S. destroyers that are already in the Persian Gulf.
Mark Mazzetti, what's your reporting on and understanding of the status of the Strait right now and why this agreement collapsed so quickly?
Well, it seems that the Strait is back to where it was, which is pretty much a standstill with very little shipping going through it. As we wrote over the weekend, Iran has seen the Strait of Hormuz kind of as its deterrent, not only its leverage now, but also it's a deterrent for the future. And also, I think that what we're seeing right now is a bit of a split maybe in the Iranian government about what exactly to do now, how to proceed. After President Trump on Friday declared without a whole lot of evidence that the Strait was totally open, Iran's foreign minister echoed the president's statement. But then the next day and the day after, you saw the IRGC, the military force in Iran, make a statement that, no, Iran is still controlling the Strait. It will be shut down. So there may be a split inside Iran's government about just whether to sit down at the table or whether to sort of press the advantage they have now, they think they have, to, before there are talks, gain more leverage. And then if that's the case, we'd probably see very little progress this week.
Ambassador Ginsburg, lots of finger pointing right now, both sides trying to gain the upper hand. Iran's foreign ministry saying Tehran has no plans regarding this new round of talks, at least at this point, even though the U.S. delegation is on the way. Both countries firing in the Strait, claiming the ceasefire has been violated, yet the ceasefire otherwise appears to be holding. What does that tell you?
It tells me that each side at this point in time still is not quite sure exactly what any negotiated agreement looks like. Neither side has going to Islamabad, if indeed there will be talks, Anna, to negotiate the fundamentals. They may be trying to get to a point where they're going to negotiate whether or not Iran will turn over the nuclear stockpile of enriched uranium. They will perhaps try to negotiate what will happen in the Straits. But at this point in time, there's such uncertainty around these talks, as well as such distrust in Tehran, such a breakdown between the Iran Revolutionary Guard Corps as well as the civilian part of what remains of the Iranian government. And so the American people are left basically having to pay a higher price at the pump, and there's I have no prediction to be any grand bargain again in Islamabad, despite what the Pakistanis are trying to do. And finally, Anna, the Iranians believe that this is just a ruse for the Americans to resume attacks on Iran.
David, what should we make of the fact the U.S. is going to Pakistan without Iran even agreeing to be there? And what are their objectives?
The key thing here, I agree with what Mark said and the ambassador said, we may just get an extension of the ceasefire. The ceasefire expires Tuesday night Eastern time, and that would be positive, given, or it could expire and we could be back at war. So I think that's the main objective. Vice President Vance hasn't left yet. That'll be a sign if the U.S. is serious. And I think it's good for the U.S. to go, and I think the fact that Vice President Vance is there is helpful. That makes it, again, these are the most high-level talks between the U.S. and Iran in decades, since the revolution in 1979, because a vice president is there. So we'll see what happens. And the Iranians also think that Vance opposed this war, and they want him to be there. So we'll see what happens the next few days. But the big thing is this ceasefire is expiring Tuesday night. There's got to be some kind of progress before then.
Mark Mazzetti, coming back to your reporting, because it's amazing that the Strait of Hormuz has become such a crucial piece of this war. And your reporting confirms what we saw this weekend, that even with the reduced naval capabilities, Iran can still freeze the Strait of Hormuz. Has Tehran ever used this leverage before? And was this something the Trump administration game planned?
Well, Iran has lay mines in the Strait of Hormuz before in the 80s in the war it had with Iraq. And they always, of course, had this leverage. They had this threat because of their own geography, right? They control the strait. Now, there was plenty of warning beforehand, before this war started, that they might do this, that there was a possibility, because they no longer really have to lay mines anymore. They have an arsenal of missiles and drones, and they can just fire at ships as it goes through the strait. It's much easier for Iran to control it than it once did. But as our reporting and others have said, the administration largely ignored this threat, or didn't take it particularly seriously, thinking that, well, Iran didn't do this last June when Israel and the United States attacked, so it was unlikely to do it again. And yet the circumstances are so much different this time because Iran believes that this was really an existential threat. It was a regime change war. So why not use any leverage that they have? And they have used it. So it's a real miscalculation on the U.S. part.
But, Mark, how much ability does Iran actually have at this point when it comes to its military? Well,
it has plenty of capability to continue to hold the strait hostage. As a story we wrote over the weekend said, 40 to 50% of their missile capacity is still there. These are short-range or medium-range missiles. Their drone capabilities are still pretty significant. Again, you don't need very much to scare off commercial shipping from going through the strait. It's in many ways just the potential and the prospect. So they have plenty of capability if that's what we're talking about. Now, is there capability to sustain a long-term war against the United States and Israel? That's another question. But in terms of the situation right now, their capability is still pretty strong.
How do you see it, Colonel? What would it require for the U.S. to fully eliminate Iran's ability to attack or threaten the strait?
I don't know that we could fully eliminate that capability, but we could push through the strait. It would be a major combat operation on its own. It would involve U.S. ships escorting tankers or commercial ships. It would involve aircraft overhead, possibly amphibious forces seizing some of the islands, air defense forces ashore, maybe helicopters to sweep the strait for speedboats, a major combat operation, but it could be done. there would be casualties, and the administration has not wanted to do that. They now have the pieces in place to do that. They did not have that initially, as we heard. They did not expect this, but they could.
And the president just told CBS that as the ceasefire expires, PBS, that if this ceasefire expires, lots of bombs start going off. And Ambassador, over and over again in this war, President Trump will make these sweeping, optimistic claims initially. The markets and media devour it. Then the situation deteriorates, and Trump calls reporters to try and retake control of the narrative again, often by making new threats against Iran. Is this an effective way to deal with this specific adversary?
Absolutely not. And the president's bravado, along with his Secretary of War Defense, whatever you want to call it, are essentially misleading the American people into believing that this war is basically being fought on America's terms. The sheer idea of bombing Iran back to the Stone Age and hoping that somehow or other this regime is going to collapse is absolutely not going to happen. The Iranian people, unfortunately, are the victims, and the American people paying the price at the pump are the victims, and the Israeli public themselves are also wondering, how do they get out of a war that both their leader and the American president totally miscalculated the strategic ability to achieve its ends and force this regime to capitulate?